Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Soundbites for Immigration Success. We're happy to have you with us. We do this series so you can get to know your fellow colleagues, hear their challenges and successes, and take a piece of takeaway advice from them. I have with me today the amazing Phil Mooney. Hi, Phil.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's so great to have you with us. Phil, I'd like you to introduce yourself for our audience, and can you explain why you decided to become an immigration consultant?
Well, okay, so my name is Phil Mooney. I was born a poor Canadian, anyways, I won't go that far back, but I was born in Canada. But I'm happy to say that my mother was an immigrant from the United States. My father was an immigrant from Ireland. My wife was an immigrant from Germany, and our kids are have multiple citizenship in Ireland and Canada. Um, so immigration has been a part of my life, but I didn't think much about it. I also, after going to college and getting married and having kids, I ended up in the corporate world and worked my way up from being a salesman up to the corporate offices. And I traveled a lot extensively around the world, and I really didn't give immigration much of a thought. I had a visa to work in the United States for a couple of years in terms of, and moved there for a year or two. But immigration was just nothing more than like, well, you got to pay taxes, or you have to go down the street, or pay for an airplane, or whatever. Okay. But then after about 30 years in the corporate world, the time came when the company I was with for 25 years, and I parted company, mainly because they didn't need me anymore, and I was getting on in age, and youth is always a prerogative. But for whatever reason, they gave me a package and said goodbye, and I started looking around for other work. And frankly, I became an immigration consultant because it was a job I could do. I was offered. Um, I had offers to go and continue to travel all over the place, but I didn't really want to move away from home, away from Canada at this point in our family's development. And so, someone offered me a job actually of setting up like a franchise operation for a company in Quebec that was taking business people to the U.S. primarily. They were helping Quebecers mostly go down to the U.S. border and get work permits and help them with green cards and everything else. And the reason they did that was because the U.S. immigration at the border didn't speak French, so they would go down to translate, and their lawyers would go down to translate for the Canadians who wanted to go, and the companies wanting to expand their business. And they wanted to expand this business outside of Quebec, and so they basically set up a franchise kind of an arrangement. And I was looking for different work, and I was referred to these people by somebody I knew in business. Um, and they offered me a position of saying, set up your own business in Toronto and be our English speaking representative, if you will, because we think there's a big market out there for these kinds of services. Um, and I did. I didn't know at the time if I really wanted to be in business for myself. I never thought I did. I was used to a corporate expense account, but I had the funds, if you will, to get started in the business. So I set up. They had very demanding standards for setting up a very good office and system and all this. So I set it all up, and I became an immigration consultant almost by accident. In that it was a job that was offered to me, and I looked at it as a job that I could do, um, and make a living for my family. Our kids were out of the home by then. One of them was married. The second one got married not too long after. We have two sons. The good part was we started having grandkids when I stopped traveling worldwide. So I got to experience the joy of all of that, which continues to this day. But in terms of immigration, I learned a whole lot about U.S. immigration, and eventually learned about Canadian immigration because we kept getting calls. And in those days, we weren't regulated. So I could actually take a call about Canadian immigration, go talk to an immigration lawyer that we had on staff, and learn things, and then give advice, and eventually started helping do the immigration files. And then we became regulated. But the reason I became an immigration consultant was because I needed a job, frankly. It was as simple as that. I had no idea about what the business was like or what it was about. Um, as far as going forward, I guess it's more like, that there's no such thing as a calling for me. The lightning didn't flash in the sky and somebody didn't say, this is what you need to do. It was just an opportunity. I had the business knowledge and skills to set up my practice, my business, and, help get the bookkeeping going and all that stuff. The challenges that we faced are the same challenges everybody faced. The first challenge I had was, I had an office, I had a desk, I had a phone, I had some training behind me, and I had no business, none. Okay. So the issue was, how do I get business? Well, I'd been in sales and marketing for my entire career. So I thought I knew something. I had contacts. I went out and talked to business people, like in corporations. I dealt with major accounts and major companies, and I knew how to network in terms of asking people about immigration and about what they needed. And so I went and talked to a whole lot of businesses and companies, international companies and big companies, because I thought big companies have big needs. And I was talking to their HR managers mostly, and they were all absolutely happy to see me. And we had great conversations, and they said, boy, it'd be so nice to deal with somebody we can talk to instead of the lawyers we deal with, because lawyers were not salespeople. Okay. And a lot of them had issues, if you will. And I thought, hey, what an easy business. I'm going to be rich, and I'd go back to my office and plan my day and work on some more things. And after about 3 weeks, my wife came to see my office. It wasn't too far from our house. And she walked in and said, boy, really nice office. Where's the money? Because I hadn't sold anything. All right. And after about 6 weeks, she asked me the same question. We don't have unlimited amount of money. You're doing this job. Where's the money? Okay. You're spending on all of this. And I thought, you know what? My marketing plan isn't working. The people I'm dealing with are very happy to deal with me, but there aren't enough of them. And so I started doing different things, trying to figure out how should I market. I contacted business development people in Burlington, where we live. And one of the people said, well, come and do a seminar for businesses that want to expand their companies to the US. And I did a seminar, got a couple of clients from that. And then I realized I'm just not getting enough volume in. So I took a chance and I ran an ad in the Globe and Mail. It was a small ad. It said work permits for the US.
What did that cost you?
And that cost me, like, the first week cost me like $5,000. Okay. So I took a risk. I didn't tell my wife I spent that much. I took a risk. I put in the money, and I got 150 calls of people who were interested in immigration, a bunch of them for Canada, but most of them wanted to go to the US. And I called the Globe and Mail back and said, okay, how much will it cost me if I want to do this every week? And they said, well, we've got a deal about $2,000 or 1,900 or whatever per week. And we ran that ad every day for the next 6 months. And I was getting up to 200 calls a day. And I would just call. And I mean, my first call on immigration, I had to say, I don't know. They asked questions. I said, boy, that's a really good question. I'll get back to you in an hour. And I would call our immigration lawyer in Quebec, and they'd give me the answer. And but I was busy. I got really busy. I would fill notebook after notebook of people to call back, and it was very busy. And I learned. You learn by talking to people. You learn by understanding. And what I learned pretty quickly was everybody's issue was different, number one. And number two, they had no idea how immigration worked. Okay. And probably after the first few weeks, I knew more about immigration than 99.9% of all the people, just as all of our members do. After they take the course, they know more than almost everyone in the world about Canadian immigration. And that's how the business started. Okay. And so I solved the problem of how was I going to get business to the point where I had lots of business. Okay. And then lots of other business issues happened. The one thing about challenges is they keep coming. And you can't rate them, except some challenges will put you out of business. Some challenges will allow you to make lots of money, and some will make a little less money. Okay. And some challenges will be ethical challenges. And over the course of the last 24 years now, challenges keep coming. So you can't really rate them. We all have this this penchant for saying, who is the greatest football player of all time, greatest hockey player of all time. I don't think those are really valid, except for purient interest. It's more about what's important and what were the important challenges that come along that you have to deal with. And there's two things about challenges. One is if you don't deal with them, they'll kill you. Number one. And number two, you can't predict them. Okay. It doesn't matter. There are challenges, for example, in immigration that I'm used to corporate marketing, and we had business cycles, and we could try to anticipate and plan. You couldn't anticipate certain events in the world, like the subprime crisis maybe, or 9/11, but you can predict the business cycles pretty well. I found early on in immigration, you couldn't predict anything.
Yeah.
We would have month after month of great sales, great calls, great everything, and then it would stop. It would just stop for a month or two. And what you learn from that is you better have a cash reserve. Okay. The same thing with when I started. I didn't know how to be successful, so you had to have enough money in your pocket to survive. I don't have anybody I could go to borrow money. Banks won't lend you money. You don't want to go and mortgage your house, to pay ongoing business operating costs. So you need to have, when you get started in your practice, you have to have capital or the access to capital to do that. And the general rule of thumb is have at least 6 months money in the bank or available to you, or make it 12 months. And the rule typically is if after 6 months you start getting down to a 6-month reserve, start cutting costs. Cut them then. So that was a challenge at the start. All right.
But Phil, before you go on, I just want to pick up on two things from that. And I like the fact that your wife came and challenged you a little bit to say this is great, but where do we go from here? So you did the ads and you had lots of calls and lots of business. But how did you have the resources to ensure that the business could get conducted, that you could serve your clients?
Well, I was in the fortunate position where the actual physical, doing of the files was handled by our head office. I would get the clients. I would talk to the clients. I would manage the clients' expectations, tell them and explain the programs to them, collect the fees from them, send the fees to the head office, if you will, keep my share. Okay. Send the fees to the head office, and then they would actually process the files. And they had lots of people. Okay. They had enough people, because I didn't know how busy. When I got really busy, I could never have done all these files myself. Now, I could have hired people in-house to process, and I even started that when the business didn't want anything to do with Canadian files. So when I wanted to start doing more Canadian files, I did them myself. Okay, which is very important. We have to all learn. But then, I started to actually hire people to do the work. I like file managers, and I realized I don't like this. Okay, it didn't really work. So I made an arrangement with other individuals to actually do the paperwork. And one of the paralegals in the company that was doing the US files for me wanted to do Canadian files. And so I forwarded the files to her. She would put them together, under my guidance. And eventually she became an RCIC as well. Well, I guess at the time a CICC, and worked with me for several years. Again, it was more for the purpose of making sure I was using my time productively with what I was able to do, which was communicate with people and, make the decisions.
Right.
A lot about, getting people to help you is making sure you make the decisions. Okay. If you don't make the decisions, now you have a partner, you don't have a worker.
Well, I mean, ultimately you're in charge, but you're using your skills to the best that you can. The other piece here is, and you've talked about this often in industry, is that when you were holding these interviews and consultations with people, that you opted to make a choice not to charge a consultation fee. And I believe to this day that is still your standard if you're doing a one-on-one.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's just a bias. I started in my very, very early career. I worked in a warehouse, loading boxcars for Quaker Oats, and I got a job selling life insurance. Okay, big jump, right? And in life insurance, they taught you to sell. And one of the things they taught you was that the time you spent in front of a person talking about life insurance was the most valuable time. It wasn't studying, it wasn't doing paperwork. That's what it was. And that stayed with me my entire career. It was getting in front of people to talk and learning how to listen. And I know I was accused once of Someone said to me after I was expounding on something on a business side and making sure they knew my opinion, he said nobody ever accused you of being a good listener. And I took that to heart. And it may be hard to believe because people hear me talk all the time, but I try really, really hard to listen to people, and not just listen, but understand what they want. Okay. I'm not listening to their accent. I'm not listening to their problems in the sense of, well, I can help you with every problem in the world. I want to know what they want so I can then offer them a solution that is practical. And that takes practice. And when I got into this business, I was so happy to get people calling me after the first couple of, 6 weeks almost of nobody calling. I was just so happy to talk to people. So I didn't charge anything for a consultation. And then I started thinking about it. I had so many people say, "You're so easy to talk to. You're not like the lawyers we've been talking to. They want $200 just to give us an answer that we don't like." And I took that to heart. I said, "Well, what happens if you give a consultation and you tell someone they can't do what they want to do? The only thing they'll go away from is looking for a second opinion because they really, really, really want to do what they want to do. Instead, if you're honest with them and you haven't charged them, so now they're not suspicious of your motive. They'll what they'll do is they'll think well of you. They might try to do something different, and if it doesn't work, or if it does work, they'll still think well of you, and they'll still refer people to you. And I can't tell you how many people have come back to me after years and years and years who talked to me originally and came back to me the next time they had a need. Okay. I didn't have to go research them. I didn't have to advertise for them. They become your referral base. And especially when you're new in the business, anybody who's brand new in this business who charges for a consultation, in my opinion, is foregoing endless opportunities to learn. I still learn from every single client every single day. Each of them that I talk to teaches me something, and to me, they're my education, and they force us to take the theory and the knowledge and the discussions we have about everybody and narrow it down into something practical that can be used. And you get paid for what's used. You don't get paid for thinking. Okay, so just my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we need all kinds of opinions and ways to do things. So, and I really hear what you're saying. I mean, in my interviewing others through the podcast series and just in general in conversation, there are probably most consultants prefer to charge for their time and experience and knowledge and expertise, and that's perfectly legit for them. The one benefit that you have, I would say, over the general immigration consultants, you have such incredible sales skills. And it's not like and I don't mean like a used car salesman where you're like, "Oh, come on in and I'll give you this service for whatever." It's well, maybe it's just because you're so darn nice that you really listen. You really listen. So
well, I used to tell my salesmen when I had a lot of salesmen working for me, and I would tell them that you don't have to be nice, you don't have to be a good person. All you have to do is know how to fake sincerity.
Well, and I mean, at the end of the day, as we said prior to coming on air, we talked about people have these dreams that they want to come, and we have to remember at the end of the day, it's a business. It's we want to be able to pay ourselves, but we've got somebody's lives in their hands, and we still have to approach every single consultation, whether paid or not, with empathy and understanding and truthfulness. So my advice would be, if anybody's choosing to start with free consultations, is really hone your sales skills. Like really take some courses or
yeah, for sure. Learn how to listen.
Yeah.
Okay. And the one thing that I hear all the time is new people worried that someone is going to talk to them, they're going to give them advice, and then those people are going to run off and do it themselves. That the only reason they're calling is to learn how to do something they have no intention of buying. And my answer to especially new people in that situation is, well, you should take those calls and learn how to get those people off the phone. How do you know how do you learn how to deal with someone who just wants the information, to go do it themselves, or to make money from, or even, free advice they give others to make money? How are you going to know how to deal with those people if you don't? And how are you going to learn? Like, there are people who are time wasters. How do you know how to get a time waster off the phone unless you actually practice? Because it takes practice. And it's the same thing with negotiations. How do you know how to negotiate unless you practice? There are people out there who you will give a reasonable price to, who will want to have it for less, and you should never ever give it to them for less. But you'll never know how to keep your prices the where they should be and keep the money in your pocket unless you practice and fail. You can fail a few times and then you'll learn how to do it properly. And there's so many lessons to be learned. Now, I have no problem with people who charge for consultations, who that's part of their practice and that's what they do. And might be certain instances, if you're dealing with detention reviews or refugee cases, you may need to charge for consultations because the people otherwise can't pay you and won't pay you. Mm-hmm. But to me, free consultation has been part of what I do, and I'm happy to do it. I also, I'm happy to talk to any RCIC out there or a lawyer out there who calls me for advice on an issue. We just talk. It always comes back. It's a bit of paying it forward,
so
but it works.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of leads me. And my second question would be for you, what had been one of your biggest challenges? And I really like the way you said, we can't really define what's our biggest challenge, is because there are always challenges depending on the state of the industry, the state of your career, the state of where your clients are, the state of your business. So I guess my last question would be to you. You said you've been doing this 24 years. So what might be your advice to somebody just starting out today? And maybe you've already said it.
Yeah, I think I said it. I mean, well, I inferred it, if you will, but the answer to that question is when you have your license, you're ready to go, and you're wondering what to do the next day because there's no schedule there. There's nobody demanding you do things. You're on your own, basically. The answer is to keep busy. Don't sit back and continually to read cases. I mean, you can actually sit back and sit in your office, read case law all day. You can read the newspaper, you can read publications, you can read opinions, and you can become extremely well informed about all things immigration, except you won't make any money. Okay. And if you do that, you're not going to be in practice long. So what you want to do is get your name out there. I can tell you the secret, it's no secret. The reason people are successful in our business is that they get a huge referral base. It's not because they're the best SEO marketers or they put out the ads in the right place or their website is brilliant. That's not how people get successful or become long-term successes in this business. It's because they have a referral base. People know about them, about their practice, and know how to get a hold of them. And how do you get that referral base? Well, you go out into the general world. The good news is there are 12,000 or 13,000 immigration consultants. There are about 1,200 immigration lawyers. That's about 13,000 people. And there are 8 billion people in the world. Okay. Of those 8 billion people, some massive number is interested in Canadian immigration and doesn't know a thing. They don't know a thing about it. So all you have to do is make sure your name is out there circulating and people will find you. They will find you. And when they come to you as a referral, they're gold. You almost never have to negotiate a price with a referral. Never. Okay. If they can afford you, they'll pay it. If they can't afford you, they'll thank you for your time. All right. And refer others to you on an ongoing basis. So you want those referrals. So get out there and people say, well, where should I go? Well, if you're interested in refugees, go down to the refugee board hearings. You can sit in on the hearings, learn about them, talk to people around there. You could set an off. My good friend and Monica, your good friend too, Ali Amlani, told me how he started in the business. Was he went to an immigration office. In those days, people had to go into the office to get asked questions about immigration, and somebody was at the counter and would answer questions. Right? That's how it worked. He set a desk in the hallway outside. Basically saying, I can help with your immigration needs. Right? That's how he started, as in the 19. I tell him in the year 2000, year 20, probably in 1991 or something, he started doing that, and that's how his business started. Well, go out to where meeting, go to church groups that handle refugees. You might not want to deal with refugees. You might offer pro bono services to them, but they'll get to know you and they'll tell other people about you. Go on to discussion boards, chat lines. There are so many lines out there, and bad information is being sent. Go into those and say, hey, I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, or a regulated immigration, I'm a lawyer, Canadian immigration lawyer. You're getting bad information here. Here's what you need to do. Here's a practical answer. You want more information, call me. Put your name out to 50 different discussion boards, and I guarantee you'll be getting calls. Do your advertising in the places that might need it. Go to community groups. I didn't belong to any, unfortunately for me, I'm of Irish background, but the Irish immigration wave happened a long time before I was even born, so I didn't have a natural community to go to. Doesn't mean you can't go to them. Go to events held in their community, talk to other people, your clients, and some of your clients. I've had clients invite me to gatherings of their ethnic communities, okay, and be introduced to them as an immigration consultant they can trust. That sort of effort, putting out that effort, will keep you busy. Yeah, you aren't making money that day, but the calls will start to come. And then do that as much as you can going forward, and then network with in your profession. And CAPIC is a great example of that. The hardest part about COVID was not being able to go to a CAPIC event with a good lunch, right? Because although you got good sessions, and Monica, you put together great programs, it's everybody talking to each other at lunch, after lunch. You get to talk to other members, and my absolutely fundamental principle is that none of us are competitors. Of all the people I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of people over 24 years, people calling me, I've been in a competitive situation with an RCIC. Never. I don't remember ever having a client say to me, I'm talking to another consultant. I've had them tell me they've talked to lawyers a few times, just a few times. So that tells me that we're not competitors. Okay. We're together in this industry, and by networking with each other, you start to find out, hey, we have strengths. And you talk about the challenges, and one of the biggest challenges you're going to have is you have to reinvent yourself from time to time. I mean, I had to reinvent myself as an immigration consultant for dealing with U.S. immigration. I reinvented it myself into dealing with Canadian immigration. Then I reinvented myself as a member of CAPIC and volunteering, which led me into all kinds of trouble. I ended up being the head of CAPIC, which then ended up in a massive fight with our regulator, which then ended up in a new regulatory body. And I ended up reinventing myself as the CEO of ICCRC for a year or so. And then I had to reinvent myself to go back into my practice. And then I found out that I was old enough to retire. So I decided to reinvent myself doing co-counseling. And as it turned out, I'm busier doing co-counseling now than I was in my last 5 years of practice. But those are the challenges you face, and you need to be ready to reinvent yourself in all of those areas. And what I've found along the way is that our colleagues, associates, persons like yourself, Monica, and others, they are a great resource to help you, make those decisions going forward the best way. And they're great people to talk to. As I like to say, ours is a very lonely business. Most of us work on our own. We work on, and our, when we go home at night, our families don't necessarily want to hear about immigration. That's what's kept us away from them. I mean, if you go to a party, they think all you ever do is bring people here on rusty boats and leave them on the shore. So the only people you can talk business to or immigration to is each other. And that's where networking helps all of us. And I strongly recommend it. And CAPIC is a great place to network.
Yeah, well, and Phil, thank you for saying that. And it sounds so cliche-ish to say, and almost everybody that I've spoken to through the podcast has spoken about networking and connections. And it sounds so simple, but at the end of the day, that will really become your biggest resource. And I wanted to focus on one word that you said, that you spoke about reinventing. So we're in an industry where you constantly have to adapt and evolve and grow. So that's another great piece of advice, especially for those who are, longer in the industry and figuring out their next steps and where they're going to go. I have one final question for you, Phil. Was it all worth it? Would you do it again? to become an immigration consultant?
That's a really great question because, I thought I was, when I was when I was going to university, I didn't know what my life was going to be, but I was thinking a career doing something. I didn't know what it was. I ended up, working in a warehouse, and then I ended up in sales, and then I ended up in the chemical business. And I thought, hey, we're doing good things. We help people, eat off of dishes that are clean and safe and sanitized, or laundry and is clean. And, it's a valuable thing to do for society. And when I got into immigration, I didn't get into it because I thought it was for the good of humanity. I thought I needed a job, right? Once I got into it and I started realizing that I was helping people, it was two major benefits. One was I'm helping people achieve their dreams. And those people are really appreciative. I've often said that I have clients actually who've named their kids after me. Okay, it's a second name, but there's that's something amazing. The gratitude, the joy that you get, from family, and then the joy you get from helping them and their families is amazing. And the second part is, I think we're helping build Canada. We're helping people come to this country the right way to Canada's a pretty great country, despite, people love to complain. That's part of the Canadian deal. We complain about the weather all the time because our governments are so boring. Okay. But we complain about almost everything, yet we live in a really great country. People around the world know that it's a great country. And we, as immigration consultants and lawyers who are helping people come to Canada the right way, are helping build that country. I think that's an amazing deal. So was it worth it? Absolutely. Two reasons. One was because it's of those things I just mentioned, and two, because I ended up leaving the world of traveling around the world on a corporate expense account to a world where I've been here for the birth and growing up of 5 grandkids. The joy has been immense. For those two reasons, yeah, absolutely. Had I known going in it was this good, I would have, just been even happier. But, none of us know what the future is going to hold. All we can do is work hard for our families, and find joy where we can. The good news is, in this business, and just like in your family, you can find a lot of joy there. And I recommend it to anybody.
Well, Phil, what a marvelous way to end our podcast. And we've spoken a little longer than some of our others, but what you've had today has been so valuable. And thank you for sharing, who you are and your journey and your stories. And I love the fact that you said you've obtained great gratitude and joy from the profession, and that it's given so much to you yourself and allowed you to, be at home and raise your family and see life around you. And I hope our audience takes that away as their final takeaway. Phil, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Monica, and best of luck to everyone. And if you have a question about anything, feel free to call me anytime. No charge.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you at the next one.